Since we're all in quarantine, I thought I'd tell you a little story. I was 26 years old when I was discharged from the Navy. I lived off my savings for a week, and then I took a job as a night watchman. I'd seen the job advertised in the newspaper. I called the number, and the guy told me to come to his house that afternoon. He lived out in Buffalo Grove. I was supposed to go out there for an interview. He was standing in the driveway when I pulled up. He wore a policeman's uniform, like light blue shirt, dark pants, spit shine shoes. We shook hands and he brought me inside. He had converted his garage into an office and he sat behind his desk. And he told me that on any given night, he has 60 men working for him, guarding factories and warehouses and office buildings. And he told me that all 60 men address him as commander, and I should too. And I thought this was a little much for a guy who works out of his garage, but I needed the job. He then asked me if I'd ever been in military service. Well, yeah, I told him I just did 4 years in the Navy. 28 months of that was sea duty. I got out last Friday. Oh, he loved that. He hired me on the spot. He gave me some tax forms to fill out, and while I did that, he hunted me up a uniform I could wear. He comes back to the desk and sits down and looks right at me and says, "Would you be comfortable wearing a loaded firearm while you're on duty?" Yeah, I told him. I said I grew up in a house full of loaded guns. It was true. My grandfather believed that too many people are shot with unloaded guns, so he kept all of his loaded. The commander then reached into his bottom desk drawer and he pulls out a fully loaded Colt 38 caliber revolver with gun belt and holster. "Here," he said, "only wear this at work. Only use it if your life's being threatened. And whatever you do, don't cock it." Last year we had a guy shoot his kneecap off. That was it. I was free to go. He gave me the gun. No paperwork, no forms, he didn't even ask to see my driver's license. But before I left, he reaches into his vest pocket and he pulls out a small card. "Here," he said, "it's the emergency phone number." I looked at it and the card said emergency phone number, but the number was the same one that was in the newspaper ad. So the next night, I started my new job. It was in a big warehouse north of the city. I sat at a little desk at the front of the warehouse. And every hour I had to get up and do my rounds. I had to walk the inside perimeter of the warehouse. And every 100 feet or so was a small metal box on the wall. And in the box was a key attached to a string. And I carried with me a big thing that looked like a gigantic alarm clock. And I would take the key and I would put it in the alarm clock and twist it. And it would record my location and time. And I guess the next day the commander would open this thing up and see if I was doing my job or not. But that was it. It took me like 5 minutes to walk through the warehouse. And the rest of the time I just sat at the desk. I was not prepared for this level of boredom. I had thought that being at sea in the Navy was boring. Nothing compared to sitting alone in a warehouse all night. So to stave off boredom, I went out the next day and I bought the biggest, thickest book I could find. And each night I would read several chapters from it aloud. And the idea of reading aloud was so I wouldn't fall asleep. The book was Moby Dick. Now, if there was ever a book that had every detail of whaling in the 19th century in it, it's Moby Dick. There are whole chapters on harpoons and how they're thrust, how whale boats are outfitted, and how the whale is processed once it's killed, which is pretty grotesque. But it was chapter 60, a chapter called The Line, where I ran into trouble. Attached to the back end of a harpoon is a line, a long line, very long, hundreds and hundreds of feet of it, and it's all coiled up in the whale boat. And when the whale is harpooned, he takes off. He either dives or he swims off. And the guys in the whale boat try to keep up with him rowing, and this whale line just speeds out of the whale boat as it follows, is attached to the harpoon. And oftentimes, men would get their arm or leg caught in the line. It would twist around, and it would pull them overboard, and they drown. I mean, this was serious stuff. Um, Melville himself says that being in a whale boat with the whale running with the line was like sitting inside a steam engine with it running. Uh, anyway, at the end of that chapter, he writes like 4 lines that I thought were just perfect. All men live enveloped in whale lines. All are born with halters round their necks. But it is only when caught in the swift, sudden turn of death that mortals realize the silent, subtle, ever-present perils of life. Oh, God, I love that. I just thought it was beautiful writing. I read it aloud a second time, and it really affected me. Halfway through my third reading of it, I heard a loud click. I had very stupidly let my right hand drift down to my side, and my thumb found the hammer of the revolver, and I cocked the gun. Stupid. Now, this is a .38 caliber gun. If it goes off, it's going to blow a hole in something, maybe in me. I very slowly took the gun out of the holster and I put it on the desk in front of me, facing away from me. I looked at that gun for a good 20 minutes trying to figure out how to uncock it, but I couldn't. Finally, I called the emergency number. It was 2 a.m. "Commander," I said, "this is Zimmerman. You'll never guess what happened." There was a long pause. "You cocked the gun, didn't you, Zimmerman?" Yeah, but he was okay with it. He told me what to do. I was to take the gun outside very carefully, stand in the parking lot, and hold it above my head with my right arm. And then I was to take my left thumb and forefinger and grasp the hammer, then very slowly squeeze the trigger and allow the hammer to go back to its rest position. I did it, and it worked. Oh, I was free. It was wonderful. I put the gun back in the holster, and I walked back inside. Except I didn't get inside because in my haste to get outside with the loaded gun, I had left my keys on the desk. I was now locked out of the building I was being paid to watch. There was a 24-hour 7-Eleven a couple blocks away. I hiked down there with my uniform, with my gun, and I called the emergency number again, which by now I had memorized. Oh, he was not pleased to hear from me. Not pleased at all. He came out right away and he opened the warehouse and fired me on the spot. "Zimmerman, you are just not equipped to do this kind of work." That was 48 years ago. Since then, I've had many successes in life, done a lot of things I'm really proud of. But every night, when I put my head down on the pillow, I hear the commander's words. "Zimmerman, you are just not equipped to do this kind of work." All men live enveloped in whale lines. All are born with halters round their necks.